Ace Frehley stopped playing. The amplifier was still on. The microphone was still live. But the strings went quiet. And that silence said everything. The venue was the Beacon Theater in New York City. March 1987. Not a Kiss show. Not an arena tour. This was Ace Frehley solo. Smaller rooms. Different energy. The kind of shows where you could see every face in the crowd, where the distance between stage and audience collapsed into something intimate and raw. 800 people had come to see the spaceman play. They wanted the solos. The effects. The flash and fire that made Ace Frehley a legend. They wanted to hear what happens when a man picks up a guitar and makes it sound like something from another planet. The show had been going well. 3 songs in. The crowd was warm. Ace stood center stage in his leather jacket, his Gibson Les Paul hanging from his shoulder, that familiar quiet intensity on his face. Not smiling. Not performing in the traditional sense. Just there. Present. Letting the guitar do what guitars do when Ace Frehley touches them. Then something shifted. During the bridge of the 4th song, Ace's right hand, mid-solo, mid-phrase, simply stopped moving. His fingers lifted off the strings. 6 inches of empty air between flesh and steel. The last note hung in the room for exactly 2 seconds before fading into nothing. The band behind him kept playing for another 3 beats before they noticed. The bassist looked up. The drummer's rhythm faltered. One by one they stopped. Complete silence. 800 people staring at a man standing on stage with a guitar he wasn't playing. The amplifier hummed. The stage lights glowed. But Ace Frehley's strings were quiet. Ace didn't defend himself. He never did. To understand what happened in that moment, you need to understand what happened 6 hours earlier. Sound check. 4 p.m. The Beacon Theater mostly empty except for crew members running cables and adjusting lights. Ace stood on stage with his guitar tech, testing levels, making sure everything worked the way it needed to work. A man walked in from the back entrance. Mid-40s. Expensive suit. The kind of person who looks like they own things. He walked down the center aisle with the confidence of someone who believes their presence matters. His name was Richard Castellano. Music journalist. Not the kind who wrote reviews, the kind who wrote think pieces. The kind who had opinions about what rock music should be versus what it had become. The kind who believed guitar heroes were relics of a dying era. He'd written about Ace before. Not kindly. Articles with titles like, "The Spaceman Fell to Earth," and "Why Gimmicks Don't Age Well." Pieces that questioned whether Ace Frehley was ever really talented or just lucky to be in Kiss at the right time. Richard had requested a pre-show interview. Ace's manager had agreed, hoping for positive press. Richard showed up with a notebook and a tape recorder. He didn't shake Ace's hand. He sat in the front row, clicked the recorder on, and started talking. "So Ace," Richard began, not waiting for any pleasantries. "You've been doing these smaller venue shows for a while now. Solo stuff. Is this a choice or is this just where you ended up?" Ace stood on stage, guitar still in his hands from soundcheck. He looked at Richard for a moment. Then back at his guitar. "It's where I am," Ace said simply. "Right. But Kiss was stadiums. Arenas. Massive production. And now you're playing theaters. Don't you feel like you're, I don't know, going backward?" Ace's guitar tech glanced at him, waiting for some kind of response. Ace adjusted a tuning peg. Didn't answer. Richard continued. "I mean, the makeup is gone. The rockets. The blood. You're just a guy with a guitar now. Do you think people still care about that? Just the guitar?" Ace finally looked up. His expression hadn't changed. Calm. Neutral. He'd heard versions of this question for years. From journalists. From producers. From people who thought spectacle mattered more than sound. "You came to watch me soundcheck," Ace said quietly. "Why?" Richard seemed caught off guard. "What?" "You came early. You're sitting here listening to me check my guitar. If all that mattered was the show, the gimmicks like you said, you would have just come for the concert. But you're here now. Listening to this. He strummed a single chord. Let it ring. So what is it you actually came for? Richard's jaw tightened. I came to ask questions. You came, Ace said, his voice still quiet, still steady. Because somewhere you're wondering if maybe I can still play. And you want to see it before you write that I can't. The crew members within earshot had stopped working. This wasn't an argument. Ace wasn't raising his voice. But something in the air had shifted. Richard stood up, clicking off his recorder. I've heard enough. I'll see you after the show. He walked out the way he came. Confident. Dismissive. The kind of exit meant to have the last word. Ace watched him go. Then went back to soundcheck. Subscribe and leave a comment, because some moments only make sense when we remember them together. The show started at 8 p.m. Richard Castellano sat in the third row. Notebook open. Arms crossed. The posture of a man waiting to be proven right. The first 3 songs were solid. Good solos. Tight playing. The crowd responded well. Richard took notes. Occasionally nodding. Occasionally writing something that probably wasn't complimentary. Then came song 4. A slower number. Blues-based. The kind of song that gives a guitarist room to breathe, to stretch out, to show what they can actually do when the flash is stripped away. Ace started the solo. Simple at first. Clean notes. No effects. No pedals. Just fingers on strings and amplifier responding. The kind of playing that sounds easy until you try to do it yourself and realize how much control it requires. Richard was watching. Everyone was watching. But Richard was watching differently. Looking for mistakes. Waiting for proof that the spectacle had always been hiding something hollow. Halfway through the solo, Ace bent a note. Held it. Let it sing across the room. Then he did something no one expected. He stopped playing. His right hand lifted off the strings. Hovered there. 6 inches of space. The note faded. The band kept going for 3 beats before they noticed and stopped too. Silence. Ace looked out at the audience. Then directly at Richard Castellano in the third row. You wanted to know if I can still play, Ace said into the microphone, his voice cutting through the confused quiet. Let me show you what I mean. He turned to his guitar tech standing stage left. Hand me the acoustic. The tech hesitated. Ace, we don't have an acoustic in the set list. I know. Get me one anyway. Away from the spotlight, Ace made a choice no one expected. 2 minutes later, someone brought an acoustic guitar from backstage. A simple Martin. No pickup. No amplification. Just wood and strings. Ace unplugged his Les Paul, handed it off, and took the acoustic. He pulled a stool to center stage. Sat down. The house lights came up slightly, not full brightness, but enough that you could see faces. Enough that the distance between performer and audience collapsed entirely. 800 people completely silent. The band standing behind him, unsure what was happening. Richard Castellano in the third row, pen frozen over his notebook. Ace positioned the acoustic on his knee. Looked at it for a moment. Then started playing. No effects. No amplifier. No flash. Just fingers on nylon strings in a room quiet enough to hear every note. He played the melody from the song they'd been doing. But different now. Stripped down. Naked. Every note exposed. Every choice visible. There was nowhere to hide behind volume or distortion or stage production. This was the test. The real one. Can you play when there's nothing between you and the sound except your hands and your understanding of music? Ace played for 3 minutes. No one moved. No one coughed. The room breathed with the music. He built the solo slowly. Each phrase leading naturally to the next. No showing off. No flash. Just the architecture of melody revealing itself note by note. The kind of playing that doesn't scream, "Look at me," but whispers, "Listen to this." Richard Castellano put his pen down. Ace finished the solo. Let the final note ring until it faded completely into silence. Then he looked up. Not at Richard specifically. At everyone. "That's what I mean," Ace said quietly. "When you take away everything else, this is what's left. And this is what I've always been." He handed the acoustic back to his tech. Picked up his Les Paul. Plugged it back in. The band started playing again. The show continued. What followed silenced everyone in the room. After the concert ended, after the crowd filed out, after the crew started breaking down equipment, Richard Castellano was still sitting in the third row. Ace's manager found him there, staring at the empty stage. "You waiting for something?" the manager asked. "Is Ace still here?" "Yeah, he's in the dressing room." "Why?" Richard stood up slowly, gathering his things. "I need to talk to him." The manager led him backstage. Through the narrow hallways of the Beacon Theater. Past crew members carrying cables and guitar cases. To a small dressing room where Ace sat alone, still in his stage clothes, his Les Paul resting against the wall. Richard stood in the doorway. Ace looked up but didn't say anything. "I was wrong," Richard said. No preamble. No excuses. Just those 3 words. Ace waited. "I came here tonight thinking I knew what you were. A performer who got lucky. A gimmick that outlived its era. I thought taking away the makeup and the production would reveal that there was nothing underneath." Richard stepped into the room, holding his notebook like it suddenly felt heavy. "But you're not a performer. You're a guitar player. An actual, real guitar player. And I spent so many years watching the show that I forgot to listen to what you were actually doing." Ace still didn't speak. Just looked at him with that same calm expression. "That acoustic set," Richard continued, his voice quieter now. "That was the bravest thing I've seen a musician do. You could have ignored me. Could have just kept playing the regular show. But you stopped everything and proved your point without saying a word." "I didn't prove anything," Ace said finally. "I just played. That's my point. You just played. No defense. No argument. You let the guitar speak. And it said more than I've heard from a dozen interviews." Richard opened his notebook. Tore out the pages he'd written during the first 3 songs. Let them fall into the dressing room trash can. "I'm going to write about tonight," he said. "But it's going to be different from what I planned." Ace picked up his guitar. Started wiping it down with a cloth. "Write whatever you want. I'll still just be playing." Richard left. 3 days later, his article appeared in a major music magazine. The title, "The Night Ace Frehley Stopped Playing." It wasn't a hit piece. It was a confession. About how easy it is to mistake flash for substance. About how the quietest moments sometimes say the most. About how a man who doesn't defend himself with words can prove everything with 6 strings and silence. Share and subscribe. Some stories deserve to be remembered. Years later, other musicians would reference that night. Not because Ace made a scene. Not because he argued or fought back. But because he did what he always did, he played. The acoustic guitar he used that night, the Martin someone grabbed from backstage, stayed with him. He kept it in his dressing rooms on subsequent tours. Not as a trophy. Not as a reminder of proving someone wrong. As a reminder of what matters. When you strip away the effects, the production, the spectacle, what's left is whether or not you can play. And Ace Frehley could always play. He still doesn't defend himself. He doesn't explain. He doesn't argue. He just picks up a guitar. And lets the strings speak. Sometimes they roar. Sometimes they whisper. And sometimes, when it matters most, they go quiet. And that silence says everything. Richard Castellano never wrote a negative word about Ace Frehley again. He became one of his most vocal defenders, always ending interviews with the same line. If you want to know what a real guitarist sounds like, listen to the moment Ace stopped playing. The acoustic guitar from that night stayed with Ace for the rest of his career. Not displayed. Not in a case on a wall. Just there. In the dressing room. Available. A reminder that real power doesn't need volume. It just needs truth.